Welcome back, everybody. I'm Dr. Craig Malkin, a clinical psychologist and lecturer for Harvard Medical School. I'm also the author of Rethinking Narcissism, which is devoted to helping you understand and cope with narcissism in all its forms and all your relationships. Today, I'm going to be talking about echoism and codependency. And if you like my videos, please like them and subscribe by turning that notification bell so you can see them when they come in. Question has come up a number of times: is echoism codependency? And the answer is no. Echoism is not codependency, and there's a number of reasons for that. First of all, remember the definition of echoism that I refined with my colleagues when I was expanding on the idea of echoism as an adaptation and wanted to really make it clear for everybody. And we researched all the different patterns of behavior. The core of echoism is the opposite of narcissism, where narcissists are driven to feel special. Echoists, by definition, have a fear of special attention or receiving that sense of an experience of being special to others in a certain way, because they are often punished or shamed, or being seen and coming out of the shadows, if you will, was both emotionally and physically dangerous for them. People who were abusive towards them would often take the opportunity for this increased visibility of the echoist growing up as they develop their echoism to single them out or attack them or criticize them or mistreat them in some way, or at the very least, if not actively, aggressively behaving towards them, abandoning them or neglecting them. And this creates that sense of danger about what happens if I expect or look for or receive special attention. So the core driving, organizing principle of echoism is a fear of being special, seen as special, receiving special experience or attention in any way that will lead to something bad, and it creates this sense of a fear of being burdened in some way. So while that may lead, in some people who have echoism, to a pattern of focusing on others at the expense of one's own needs, go back to how echoism develops. Of course, some people are going to be born a little bit more towards the empathic end of behaviors. Everything is pretty much on the spectrum, and people are born somewhere along that spectrum, and that includes empathy. And often people who are a little more empathic might handle that echoism by making sure they're not a burden by focusing on others. And this is where that confusion about codependency comes in. Codependency is not a defined research construct, meaning it's not a precisely defined definition of a pattern of behaviors that holds across studies that everybody agrees upon. It emerged through discussions of addiction, what happens in addiction and substance abuse, in a particular situation where one partner kind of colludes and the others maintaining their addictive behaviors, and then it kind of branched out from there. I'm not going to critique codependency in some large-scale way. I mean, these things resonate for people in this way of understanding, and I'm just saying that it's not an accepted, precise category of patterns of behavior in the research, because it tends to be so general. It includes a lot of things. So that's one huge difference between echoism and codependency as an idea, is that echoism, again, is a very specific definition. It's this fear of receiving special attention or standing out in any way. And so that leads to two different possibilities. When you have this more empathic person who develops, they might handle their echoism by, sometimes falling into relationships where they focus a little too much on the other person's needs, wants, desires, or the expense of their own. And I think that's where this overlap with this idea of codependency comes from. But that's just one pattern. Some other people who struggle with echoism are so uncomfortable with being on the receiving end that they might, in fact, just opt out of relationships all the time. And you've probably met people like this or come across in your life. They tend to be a little bit more isolative. They tend to pride themselves on doing things in their own way. And contrary to this idea of being overly dependent on a relationship, and particularly a relationship where both people struggle in some way, that is focused around codependency in general. With echoism, you might find somebody who is so averse to being on the receiving end and so afraid of being a burden that they actively and aggressively keep people at arm's length. So the classic example of this brand of echoism is the person says, I'm fine. I don't need anybody fussing over me. I don't need you treating me like a child. I will take care of it. At the same time, there's somebody who's perfectly happy to lend a hand, particularly in practical matters, although they might not let people that close in relationships. It might be the neighborhood rock. It might be a pretty sturdy person in that way, at least from the outside. But what both types of echoism have in common, and this distinguishes it from codependency, is that it's really just about that worry about having that special attention in some way and what might result and the problems might result if they do. And if you're listening to this and it resonates for you in any way, it also, as is often the case when I'm describing these concepts, leads to some particular solutions. So if the fear is of being on the receiving end, whether you're falling into that category of being kind of the consummate caretaker that overlaps with this idea of codependency in some cases, or if it's more what you identify with is that sense of kind of keeping people at arm's length and not taking too much from them. Either way, it's both about that discomfort receiving. So I would suggest that you try one simple exercise and then ask yourself, what is it about being on the receiving end that feels so uncomfortable? That is, what would you be feeling if you were in a relationship where someone was attending to your needs, your feelings, your desires, where they were actively interested? Because that is in fact the experience that was left out or came to feel to you like it might lead to something bad, that this pattern is meant to exclude from your experience, that we want included again in order for you to have mutual relationships of the kind that are going to feel better to you. So what would you be feeling if you were on the receiving end, if somebody was relating to you in that way? And it might be kind of an unknown to you. It might be a very unfamiliar question to even try to answer, because very often when people fall into these patterns, they structure their life and their experience in a way where that's seldom something they can even reach, let alone expect in their relationships. So I hope you found that helpful. And if you like it, give it a thumbs up, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll be sharing more.